Welcome, everyone. I'm Ivy Rivera. I'm a psychic medium, a Taino Arawak, and I own a school called the Ivy League Psychic Academy. Tonight's free mini class is Past Life Trauma. What is this? Why is it there? And how is it useful for you to understand? Why is it useful for you to understand what's going on with it, what's going on in this life? I don't need to be dealing with other past lives. I have no interest in knowing. However, I did find that on my own journey, I really couldn't fully be myself, do the shadow work that I needed to do. I couldn't do the healing in this life without understanding who I was. Who I was adds up to be who I am right now. And you can't cut off sections and bits and pieces, parts of yourself, and understand yourself as a whole. So I embarked on my journey to better understand what was going on with my past lives. And I work with clients and students where they have past life trauma that really hinders their progress, their growth, their prosperity in this life. And that has become a major focus for me in the last 10 years, to be able to help people with this aspect of it. What is past life trauma? It is essentially unfinished business that you have, whether it be in relationship with someone else, it be in relationship to your own self, or it be because of a situation that occurred that was really toxic and painful, and you weren't able to process it. You either didn't process it because you ran out of time, essentially you died, and it's not the kind of work that you can do on the other side. It's the kind of work that you can only do on planet Earth as a human being, having a human experience. We have to remember that Earth is a classroom. We are here to work, to grow, to learn lessons, to accomplish tasks. If it's the kind of work that had to be done on Earth, what happens is you reincarnate in that they must have been a horrible person in a previous life. I must have really done something wrong, right? I was like Darth Vader or something to deserve this kind of pitiful circumstance that I exist in. However, the reality of a lot of the hardship that we go through is that you've already done this a couple times and we really want to get it over with, don't we? It is residual. You are reincarnated and reliving a circumstance over and over and over again until you can finally, once and for all, learn the lessons, apply it to your healing, and put closure on this thing. So it's not that you're being punished, it's just that you haven't finished yet. Now, karma is a real thing. That's another class, but today we are focusing on what is this and why is it useful. If you understand where your past life trauma is, you are able to level up in your life more rapidly. You have expansion on your prosperity in really unique ways, and you are able to have more significant relationships and partnerships with others. Because once past life trauma is removed, we could say, or at least you're working with it properly, it empowers you to move forward in all areas. When we come to Earth, we have a life contract. See my free mini class here on what a life contract is. It entails everything that you came to Earth to do. Lessons, certain relationships, jobs, any unfinished business from past lives, whatever it is in this life contract. You sign on to this before you come to Earth. You pick your parents, you pick your life circumstances, and you pick certain abilities, certain characteristics, and traits that you might have to enable you to get this work done. However, everything within this life contract is on a deadline. And what I sadly see happen with so many of my clients, so many of my students, and I felt the pressure in my own life, is that I'm about to miss a deadline because I haven't dealt with past life trauma. So I have all these trauma triggers and I can't figure out how to get past that. It can be really illogical, this, and you can meet those deadlines better. Let's talk about how can we better identify if we have past life trauma. So we're gonna look at 5 different areas that I see repeatedly with people. Yes, there are more. We have time for about 5 tonight, and feel free to post your questions or comments if yours don't fit in with this. But number 5, you have inexplicable phobias, fears, or trauma responses to things that don't really logically fit with your life circumstances. For example, maybe you are terrified of getting on a boat. You are so terrified of the water that you're pretty uncomfortable. Maybe you're okay on the beach, but you don't like to see images of the water. You're terrified of what might be living in there. You have fears and phobias of drowning. Well, this could signify that you were not necessarily on the Titanic in a previous life. Everyone thinks they were, but that you were quite possibly in a situation where you drown. And we see this commonly also with things like fire, people who have to check the stove like 7 times before they leave the house. They have traumatic dreams of fire. They think they're going to burn in the night, all kinds of things associated with this. Some people have this with heights. Now, it is, of course, perfectly logical to be afraid of jumping out of an airplane or falling off a cliff or something like this, having to cross a rickety bridge. I see foreign countries that people cross these bridges to get to school and things, and I'm amazed by these people and how they succeed. But it is something that a lot of people deal with, being up in heights, and it doesn't bother them like it bothers some people. Well, I think some people have fallen from heights. It has also been in the past a form of punishment, pushing people, dropping people from heights. So we have a lot of trauma that can come up in this life, but we don't live in that type of society anymore. And we really don't understand why something that seems perfectly safe or everyone else is doing it can be such a traumatic experience for you. And so notably, you've had nothing in your past that would have caused for something like this to happen. You didn't drown as a child or live through a fire or watch a family member fall off the roof of the house. If something like that never occurred, yet it's always there for you, it could be a past life trauma. Number 4, we have a lot of residual energy from past lives if you're an old soul. It is not at all uncommon for me to do a life contract reading on someone and see that they are completing tasks from 2 to 3 separate past lives at different times in their life. And in different times in your life, you may be affected by who you were in a past life, so much so that it changes your personality. It changes your character. It changes your goals. It alters your relationships. One day you wake up and you're very much like a completely different person because this past life is ready to be dealt with. It steps in, it enters into your life contract, and you essentially become this other person. Yes, you are still at the core, whoever you are in this life, but it's almost like a walk-in, okay? If you guys have ever heard of a walk-in or split soul syndrome or multiple soul syndrome, sharing your body with multiple souls, it's kind of like that. Only who you were in a past life is still very much part of your higher mind. So who you are is an accumulation of everyone you've ever been. So we would see that all of a sudden you change a lot, and other people may recognize that. A lot of people say that this happens to them and they no longer feel a connection with their family or their friends or even their lover or their job, their career, and they set off on a whole new life. And that's okay. We need to normalize change more than what we do in especially our American society here. Everything is supposed to be a certain way, and you're supposed to follow through, and you're supposed to die doing the same old thing. And that's not life, and that's not the universe. So we have to be willing to roll with it. But significant, obvious change overnight could be that one of your past lives has come to the surface. And just like a switch, once you're done with that lesson, it could just turn off and you may be fully yourself again, or you may split again with an older version of yourself to complete another past life task. Number 3, having flashbacks to who you were, having dreams of who you were. How do you know if you're having a past life dream? I have some videos here on TikTok, and I believe we did some here on YouTube as well, a mini class on this. So go through the playlist. But I have a class up on my website, Past Lives, Karma, and Contracts, that might interest you. When we talk about seeing who you were in a past life in a dream, there are a couple key ways to know no, that's you. It just doesn't look like you. First of all, we tend to watch these dreams from the sidelines. So it's almost like you're watching yourself, but you don't realize that you're watching yourself. And who you are in this dream is likely another race, another gender, and you're living obviously in a very different place in a very different time. But you would be watching and observing as though you have a connection, an understanding. One of the other ways that it can happen is that you are in the body, your past life body, but you think like whoever you are now. So you don't realize that that's who you were. And until you look in a mirror or you really focus on what's happening around you, or you can look at your hands and see that you have a different gender, a different color skin, until then, you're just kind of going along for the ride and you may not fully comprehend what just happened. So it's important to track your dreams. I have a class up on my website called Dreams, where I teach you in lucid dreaming techniques to be able to control things so that you can dictate looking at your hands, looking in the mirror, being more present and being able to control more of what you do, especially in dreams that involve your past lives, but in all different ways. And what you want to do is pay attention also in the dream state to whether or not you're singing or speaking in foreign tongues. So different languages can just naturally flow from you when you're at rest and you're revisiting past lives. Other people who are in the room with you might be able to say you were singing in some other language, or it's almost like you're speaking in tongues. I don't recognize what you're saying. You might want to record yourself. It's very interesting. It can give you huge indication to who you were and where you were, but also what you were doing. Now, this can be activated by meeting people that are members of your soul tribe, members of your soul group. Sometimes it's activated by like a deja vu, but sometimes when you enter into really significant relationships that are part of your life contract, it automatically triggers you into a past life, and whatever's not dealt with or is important to continue forward will come up to the surface. So pay attention to major changes in your day-to-day life that may have triggered it. Number 2, if you have illness, disease, scars, if you're prone to injuries, if you're prone to even things like stones, like gallbladder, like kidney stones, things like this, birthmarks on your body. All of these things are indicators that you may have, especially if you were born with these things, that it's connected to a previous life. So pay attention to the dreams that you have, the flashbacks that you have, trauma triggers that you have, and scars, birthmarks, injuries, illnesses, disease, things like this. You should be able to connect the dots and see a pattern. For example, I'll see often with my clients, I read somebody the other day who wanted specifically a past life reading. And when I read her, I saw that she had been a large male who was a soldier in a previous life, and he was using a sword to fight, but somebody snuck up on him and got him with the sword from the back and all the way around. So she is prone in this life to issues with her organs, her stomach, lower back issues, all the way down from her rib cage down into her hips. Just general problems in that area, or pain and not understanding where it's coming from. And it was because of that jab. I had someone else recently who had taken at some point an arrow to the eye, lived, but then had eye problems after that in this life. And sometimes these things don't resurrect when we're children or we're not born with them. They come up when it's time for us to deal with those unresolved issues. And those unresolved issues and situations like that are often about forgiveness and letting go and acceptance. Number 1, the most common thing that I see is being born into a toxic family. If your family situation, your family dynamic is like a cesspool, if you were born into some unfortunate circumstances, whether this be abandonment, abuse, a narcissistic parent, maybe you had no parents at all, if you were born into also poverty, extreme circumstances, and this also also extends out to those of you born in a marginalized way, or if you're a minority, you may see more of this, that your trauma level has been increased compared to the average individual who gets good times noodle salad in their life. So what we see with this is that we are born into a circumstance that allows us to do the work. You could say that the universe has gifted you, and don't forget you chose it, to have a brand new, fresh classroom of obstacles and tests and having to learn these lessons. And for those of you that started your fight very, very early in life, I would say that it is really a guarantee and a great idea for you to book a past life reading with me. It does not require hypnosis, and we can take a look at what's going on. Remember that the difficulties you're having in your day-to-day life, the areas that you need to do shadow work on, the areas where you feel you're battling to get the upper hand and to be empowered, to be able to heal yourself so that you can go out there and heal others, wherever those struggles constantly are, we want to journal on these things. We want to sit and talk to our guides, to our ancestors, to our angels that are appointed to us, and really accept the help on a day-to-day basis. I would say 10 to 20 minutes a day. Sit quietly with them and allow for your higher mind to show you how exactly what's happening now was connected back then, and what's the bigger picture? What does it mean for your future? What ultimately are you supposed to be doing with this? Even though it feels as though it's a disempowerment, it is actually where your strength resides. This is where your leadership is. This is what makes you a healer. This is what makes you a light worker. This is where your money is. This is where all your prosperity is. So we want to take the time and give it the attention it deserves. We also see this with lovers. Often we don't want to leave a lover. It's an addiction. You feel that you cannot be without this person. Even if you're oceans apart and years have passed, this person haunts you. They show up in your dreams. There's such a connection and a bond to this individual that you feel you will always compare a new lover with them, or no one could ever actually fill their shoes or make you feel the way you did when you were with them. This may be connected to past life trauma. That could be a trauma response, not a soulmate connection. We have a class called Twin Flames and Soulmates, Truth versus Myth, that might interest you. But we see a lot of people doing this also with family members. If you just cannot seem to get away from your siblings, you can't seem to get away from your toxic parents, you have a lot of guilt, you're overly invested beyond what you should be. It's not a healthy environment for you. You may be feeling as though you have a connection or a bond with these people, and it's actually a trauma response from a past life. Now, past life connection is unfortunately able to trick us. It's able to convince us that we have something special with that toxic person because it feels very familiar. It feels like maybe you missed them. You've always known them. Time stands still when you're with them. And the familiarity can be misconstrued as something positive when it's actually something you don't ever really want to see or work with again. So be careful there. What can we do about this? Let's talk about this. You can get in touch with your Akashic Record Guide. Now, I have a class up on the website, IvyRiveraPsychicMedium.com, called Meet Your Guides. Now, in Meet Your Guides class, I introduce you to each one of your guides, but also your Akashic, who holds all of your past life information. So what I would recommend that you guys do, if you feel that you're dealing with some past life trauma, you don't really understand what exactly you're supposed to be doing with it, or if you have a relationship in your life that you're really confused about, it's not going well, but you feel like you can't get away easily, you may want to call in your Akashic Record Guide, sit for, I wouldn't do more than 15 to 20 minutes because then our imagination tends to take over. But sit quietly, call in your Akashic and ask this guide to explain it to you, to show it to you, to bring you back into the past and let you watch like a movie what exactly happened. I like one of the exercises I like to do personally is just to ask my Akashic to pull down a movie theater screen, and I'll just sit and I'll watch whatever they show me. and I'll slowly start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Sometimes it's like a big punch in the face. It's like a huge awakening and an eye opener, and you see things you never thought you would have seen. So it's sort of like fast tracking your growth and your healing process, talking to your Akashic. Now, you could do this also just with your own self, with your higher mind. Your higher mind holds all of this information anyways. And so you could just sit. You just have to keep your left logical brain and your imagination out of it. You can also do the shadow work that you need to do. You need to trust in divine timing. So get comfortable being uncomfortable. Do the work. Do the shadow work that is required based on the triggers that you have, based on the toxic emotions that you feel, and sit with it, give it the attention, and understand that it is within divine timing, because the universe wouldn't put it on you. You would not have put it on yourself unless you were ready. Notice that you didn't remember any of this for a long time. And all of a sudden, here it is. Why is that? Because it's time, because you're ready, because you're equipped, because you have the strength right now. If it comes up, it is time to deal with it, point blank. So you have to know that you're ready. You got to toughen up about these things. It is a long, dirty journey, no doubt, but we just did a 3-part church series. If you go to the Roots Revival Church here on my YouTube channel, we just did a 3-part series on shadow work. So one bite at a time, like eating an elephant. Try to, in smaller increments, deal with it. Some of the questions that we had here. Now, one of the things our members do is they ask to include in curriculum for the mini classes some of their questions. So we have one here from Crystal. Are our ancestors connected to us spiritually by trauma? I was connecting to my guides and said if any ancestors want to reach out, they could, and I have heard trauma. Well, for you, yes. It would be pretty uncommon, though, to go down through your ancestral line and to see no trauma. I think that there are some people who get a very nice ride in life, and they wouldn't understand this. But for most of us, there is trauma there. We have a free class up here called Breaking Generational Curses. Check it out. It could absolutely be that your ancestors aren't able to work with you in some of the other areas of your life where you might want to see growth and development until this is dealt with. And that's why it's so important to always do the shadow work and to never try to level jump and to always look at past life, current trauma and resolve it, because it is a block to all other areas of growth and prosperity. So yes, your ancestors would be interested in helping you to get through it. A lot of the trauma that you brought in here is also from the ancestral line. That's why we did the class breaking generational curses. Absolutely. Great question. We have another one here from Brooke. When I was 3, the first time my mom caught me swinging my baby sister, told me to stop. I told her I knew because I had been a mother before. And in the 2nd grade, she told me that I remember dying in Hawaii with my children on a mountain. That's unfortunate, right? Yeah. So there was a great TLC show a few years back, if you guys can dig it up, and it was called Ghost Inside My Child. And there were some really interesting episodes where they interviewed kids who were ranging in age from like 10 to like 16, 20 years old. And they would believe that they were their past life. So Ghost Inside My Child is about being born where you're half yourself and you're half a past life. And one of the common things to see is that you remember being a parent, you have old soul syndrome, you're older than your parents, you tell your parents how it's going to be, you remember being a mom yourself, don't tell me how to raise my baby, but you're only 4 years old. So this absolutely happens. And often what we see is that that child will remember trauma that occurred or how they died or what happened to their family. Great example is my oldest daughter, for the first, I want to say 8 years of her life, spoke repeatedly to strangers. It looked like I beat her or I traumatized her or something. She would tell them that she was not herself, that she had a different name and that both of her parents died in an airplane that crashed into a mountain. They were teachers. They never came back, and essentially that she was raised by the government. So after she said this, like several years, I thought like, I have to be able to track this. And I did in fact find a girl who was the daughter of a married couple. They were both teachers. They were on an airplane, a small plane with like 16 other people. The plane did crash into a mountain and everyone on it died. And because she had no living relatives, she went into foster care and was raised essentially in the foster care system. And so things like this happen all the time. Eventually she grew out of it. What I think we really need to do is to let go through a ceremony. And that was something else I wanted to kind of close with you guys on tonight. It's really important to have a ceremony, whether it be with your child, your own self, and to say, I am releasing this. I am releasing you. I'm letting go. And through alchemy, converting the negativity into positivity, you can either burn a piece of paper where you wrote down what it is that you want to release. You can light a candle and then blow it out at the end. But it's important to acknowledge who you were, what you went through, and that you don't feel that you need it anymore, and let it go. Into the water is another nice way to just wash it away. I believe that most people do. I do refer, though, to a lot of people as being an old soul. And I talk a lot about old souls needing to stick with other old souls, because people who are old souls have a wisdom, a strength, a healing ability about them, and they tend to attract people that are vampires and leeches and are weaker. And we would think of those as not being old souls, young souls, or I call them baby souls. You don't want to keep the company of people who haven't been around the bend a lot, because they do tend to gravitate toward those that are stronger and just sort of drain all of their energy. These are souls that don't want to do the work. They feel entitled. They are pretty toxic. They don't invest anything back into community, and they can really be very dangerous to other people because they tend to not care. But I think the truth of the matter is that we could see someone who I refer to as a baby soul, and we could see someone who is an old soul, and they both had a lot of past lives. That happens all the time. But it's what you do with it that counts. It's the person who has spent every life as much as they can being mindful and growing. That growth mindset means that they learn lessons, they evolve. They're not just about me. They reach a point where they can actually give out to others around them and contribute to the world, not just take from it. And that is the big difference. So yes, many people, pretty much everybody has a lot of past lives, but there are some that just are not doing the work. And you can look around and it's like, you know what? Technically, you're still a baby soul. You're literally doing nothing with your time. And I don't know what to say. Avoid them. I mean, we have to deal with them, but don't get into relationship with them. Don't marry one. You have one that's maybe your child or something. It's going to feel like a burden. It's going to feel like you never get anything out of it. It's very difficult to deal with these people. And the older souls are just tremendous to be in relationship with. Everything that you do with an old soul who's doing a good job is like a breath of fresh air. Right? It's very enlightening. And that's not uncommon to see, is that, again, we're born into, whether it be with our siblings or like in your situations, like a twin. And we can often get tied up in that and wonder, like, am I obligated to help this person through? Only to an extent. We have to stay in our lane. We have to understand what is our responsibility. But yeah, that's tough. And I have that same one, but I'm drawn to pirate ships. So like, that's been my favorite ride at every amusement park. But I've had a lot of past life flashbacks that I was in the water, and I'm always drawn to the water. I also know that I drown in the water. So I'm one of those people that's like addicted to the water, but I won't go in. I love boats and I want one, but I've got this weird, I'm so drawn to it. And then I am terrified of it at the same time. So yeah, the pirate ship, that's very specific, I think, to having a life where you literally lived, on boats. It could. I see this mostly with people who are obese. I've done Reiki with some of these people who have past life trauma, and it helps them with their weight loss, because what we need to figure out is whether or not you were forced to eat raw gotten food? You didn't have enough food? Are you hoarding? Are you super picky because you were forced or you went without? Typically, we're looking at one of two things. And so it absolutely could be. Sometimes with things like that too, it makes you wonder what age you were. If you're dealing with past life trauma from maybe like a child, then you could have also like childlike tendency. You know how picky kids are with their food. So it would be very interesting to look at. You have to train. You need to learn the language. I would recommend my psychic mediumship course to you, where I train you in discernment to know the difference between your right brain, your intuitive brain, your left logical brain, what is your actual intuition, and what is just your imagination. You have to learn how these things work. And without understanding the language, there's no real way to explain that to you. So education is key. Then once you get the education under your belt, it's pretty obvious what's what. And from there, you can really start the journey and dive in without wondering if you're kind of making up a story. Well, I don't know what that was. I don't know who gave it to you. I would be careful about anything you got from someone else. First of all, I don't think that this is a journey to go to someone else for. And again, I help people with past life readings. It does not involve hypnotherapy, but I also expect them to do the work, and I need to make sure that they're connecting with everything that I'm saying. So it's not just telling them the story, it's also making sure that it is identical to what they're experiencing now. So you have to be careful how you go about this. But I think that whatever information you got, as long as it resonates with you and you know it to be true and you're confident with what someone told you or what you found on your own, I think it's important to keep a journal. I cannot stress this enough to you guys that sometimes our thoughts just don't flow. Sometimes we could just really get in our own way. And it's like one step forward, two steps back. But when you are journaling something out, just even bullet points, like just simple points that you make or symbology with a date, you can see a flow and you can go back and read it later and connect the dots. And your guides are able to work with you on that more. Get out of your head, get it down on paper, and process what it means. You may write it all down, and as you're writing, you may be triggered into remembering more. You could ask your Akashic to do that process with you, and your guide could show you more to connect those dots. And just the things that I mentioned earlier, that's the journey. These are the easiest ways for you to start resolving it and putting labels on it. I guess so. I mean, anything's possible. I think, again, you need to look back and you need to figure out what that means to you. But a lot of people have anxiety in the womb because of generational, again, see the generational curses class, how our parents, especially our mothers, right, hand down trauma to us. So it could be that. It could have also been that your life was tested in the womb. So maybe in the birth process, you had a very difficult time, but survived. It could be that you didn't. It's something that you definitely need to look at, but that could also be connected to things like small spaces, claustrophobia, or water, or suffocation. So pay attention to the other details. Well, I don't speak on hypnosis or past life regressions. The readings that I do are just to inform you of who you were with, and what you did, and how it applies to now. I do Reiki sessions. I do healing sessions where I can help you with past life trauma, but I don't do it in the way I think you're referring to. So I can't speak on that, but it could. I mean, depression is also a side effect of mediumistic abilities. So is anxiety. So it could be a lot of things. I can't prescribe or diagnose, but when we have a heaviness, like a dark cloud that never seems to leave, and we can look back at our life and our childhood and our genetics and our family, and it doesn't fit, it absolutely could be. I would definitely dig deeper there, but usually there's a more logical explanation. I will absolutely confirm, though, that I have always had a heaviness, and I know I carry that in from some of my past lives, from things that have happened. And there are pictures of me, and my mother would remark, there isn't a picture of me as a kid smiling once ever. Even as a baby, I looked angry. I looked perturbed. I looked disturbed. I looked upset. And there's just a seriousness and a heaviness. And it's just a hard, cold reality. You know, some of us are born into this life and we just see things very clearly. And it isn't the prettiest picture. Others get a nicer ride. So it very much could be. And what that would indicate is that you've seen a lot. And I would say that anyone born with a feeling like that probably has a lot of help to give others. And so you may be drawn into the healing arts, helping fields, especially psychology, that's definitely something for you to look into. Absolutely. So it's not at all uncommon to see that we are born again with people from our previous lives. So not to say that your mother from a previous life is your mother in this life. It would be more typical to see like your mother in a previous life is your daughter in this life, right? Or your ex-husband is your father, or one of your kids is your parents. It just ends up getting all discombobulated kind of. It's like everyone gets shifted around, right? It's like a big chess game. But is absolutely possible that you were with her. I would pay attention to the dynamics. Do you guys feel like you were siblings? Do you feel like you were maybe even married? Do you kind of, bicker like an old married couple? Do you feel like you were best friends? Were you soldiers in war together? What is the nature of the relationship? And so often what we see with those types of relationships is a soulmate connection. So yes, we have the past life history, but we also have soulmate connection class, soulmates and twin flames, myth versus truth. When you have a soulmate connection with one of your kids, it would feel and look pretty different than the relationship you have with your other kid. And it is based on a work contract. So often when we think of soulmates, we think of like lovers, but a soulmate could be anybody. And a soulmate is based on being able to come together as a team and get work done. So she would help you, you would help her, up and up and up we go. And that bond would be really recognizable. I had another one here, and someone had asked, is it possible that, this was from a Diane, my need to constantly use herbs, home remedies, get into these types of practices, could that be connected to past life trauma? It could be connected to past life trauma, but it could just be connected to practices that you had in previous lives. So if you were a shaman, if you were a witch, if you were any kind of a healer, a lot of people who did that kind of work eventually faced some pretty negative circumstances. I'm not saying that you did, but for everyone tuning in, if you have fear about getting into spiritual practices, or even the concept of like herbology or holistics or like food as medicine, if you feel that there's some strict upbringing with you, whether it be religious or your parents or the scientific field where you shouldn't, this is bad, this is punishable, it's dark or it's wrong or it's a sign of mental illness, you may have been caught as a healer or a witch or a shaman. And a lot of people have trauma where they were burned at the stake and or stoned to death and other horrible things happen. And so part of the reason they're so terrified to get into this line of work here in this life is because they don't feel safe. On an innate level, they know something bad might happen to them. And it's like they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I would say that, Diane, the way that you feel drawn to use these things could just be a sign that you used them. It could also be a sign that you helped other people because you understood herbs and remedies and things like that. So yeah, you may have been quite the healer. People may have known you for that. And so in this life, you just pick up on it really easily. You can't imagine not living that way. It's in you. All right. Well, this was interesting, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Paul.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Spirit. Thanks everyone for tuning in.